Okay, so before we start, we will now call the meeting to order. Donc, nos prochains invités, nous avons 5 prochains invités. Nous allons accueillir l'honorable Premier ministre Justin Trudeau, l'honorable Hajdu, ministre des Services aux Autochtones, l'honorable Gary Anandasangaree, ministre des Relations couronnes autochtones, l'honorable Arif Virani, ministre de la Justice et procureur général du Canada, l'honorable Dan Vandal, ministre des Affaires du Nord. So we now welcome the Right Honourable Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the Honourable Hajdu, Minister of Indigenous Services, the Honourable Gary Anandasangaree, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, the Honourable Arif Virani, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, and the Honourable Dan Vandal, Minister of Northern Affairs. So I will let the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau begin with his opening remarks.
Merci beaucoup. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to National Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nipinak for inviting me and us to be here with you this morning. But thank you all for inviting us once again to be part of these important meetings. It has been many years that we've been coming to these and having these important conversations, and it is always a privilege to hear directly from you, in addition to all the conversations we end up having across the country in various places on so many different subjects. But it's really important for me and for the ministers to show up and take questions. So I'll just give a few remarks, and I'll turn it to each of the ministers, who will speak very, very briefly because we know we want to get into questions from all of you. Back in 2015, I made a promise to change the approach of the federal government in regards to Indigenous peoples and First Nations. I promised that we would be there as a partner. I promised that we would take on a new way of working together that involves showing up, that involves welcoming you to be part of the conversations and the processes as we move forward, recognizing the challenges of decades, generations, and indeed centuries of colonial thinking by a federal government that didn't see Indigenous peoples as full partners and even viewed them as second-class citizens. This is the essence of reconciliation, understanding the work that we need to do together as partners in both building a future, but recognizing the impacts of the past on the present at the same time. And we laid out a better path forward: respect for First Nations sovereignty, true nation-to-nation relationships, and an unwavering commitment to truth and reconciliation. Il fallait absolument qu'on change l'approche du Canada par rapport au peuple autochtone. Et ce n'est pas juste un gouvernement qui l'a décidé, c'est tous les Canadiens qui ont fait ce choix en 2015 de changer et d'exiger de meilleures relations, de meilleurs engagements avec les peuples autochtones dans ce pays, et c'est quelque chose sur lequel ce gouvernement a travaillé fort. And because of your leadership and advocacy, we've accomplished a lot together. Particularly, highlights from this past year include establishing the National Council for Reconciliation. We are very close to passing the bill on the right to safe drinking water, C-61. We recognized Haida Nation's right to self-determination with CS-16, and proper accountability and implementation of modern treaties being critical, which is why we've appointed a commissioner for modern treaties. We also recognize the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls situation remains a national emergency. We partnered with Manitoba so far on a red dress pilot, but there's much more to do. On police treatment of First Nations, we recognize that no one should feel unsafe in their communities, and that is the reality for far too many Indigenous people across this country. we need to do better collectively. I know we are engaging on that particular subject, and as well continuing the important conversations on developing First Nations policing so that you can be directly in control of your community's safety. Above all, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples remains a guiding principle for everything we do across government. But of course, for all that we've been able to do together, there is much more to do, and I feel the same urgency as you do to move forward, because every day that goes by, there are more problems that we haven't resolved, and there are more issues that we need to keep working on. But as we do it together, we will continue to show up, we will continue to listen, we will continue to work with you as true partners in the future of this beautiful land that we live on. Merci beaucoup, mes amis. I'll turn it over to Minister Virani now, Minister of Justice. Arif.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for opening us up in a good way. Thank you to National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nipanak and the AFN Executive Committee for having us here. And I just want to acknowledge, obviously, the loss that we all felt across the country with the loss of Senator Murray Sinclair this year and his tremendous leadership. I'm going to touch on three quick things as the Prime Minister is giving us marching orders to be pointed. Bill S-13 also received royal assent this fall, and that's a significant accomplishment because that bill adds a non-derogation clause component into all the interpretation of all federal legislation. And the critical piece about that is that it ensures that we will not derogate from Aboriginal and treaty rights protected under Section 35 of the Constitution, and will interpret every federal law in that manner, and that's guiding and instructive for courts. The second piece is the Indigenous justice strategy. What we do is we follow the marching orders that are given to us by the man to my left, to your right. When he gives us a mandate and he tells us in our mandate letter to go and do something, we work hard to try and do that. The Indigenous justice strategy is in my mandate letter. It is targeted about basically addressing the idea of systemic overrepresentation of Indigenous men, women, and youth in our justice system and in our correction system. We are in the final stages of developing that strategy. It has the potential to be transformative. It is informed by all of the leadership, wisdom, and expertise of all of you in terms of guiding us in that work. And it is very, very important to have it developed, implemented, and to roll it out as quickly as possible. Je tiens à souligner le dévouement de l'équipe de justice de la APN pour les travaux de beaucoup d'entre vous et vos équipes qui assistent à l'Assemblée aujourd'hui. Vous avez joué un rôle essentiel dans l'élaboration du travail des Premières Nations à cet important document. And the last piece I wanted to touch on is the incredible work of Kim Murray, the special interlocutor who is appointed by our government to look into missing children, unmarked graves, and burial sites associated with the Indian residential schools. In a very touching and moving ceremony, she presented me with her final report. It is 4 volumes deep. It is 2,000 pages long. She received tremendous acknowledgement and recognition, as she should, for the very difficult and painful work she did over the course of 2 years. It is a detailed document. We are reviewing it attentively. We're considering all of our approaches to responding to it in a manner that is comprehensive, that will address the needs of Indigenous people on this land. The most important thing is that everything we do in responding to her important work will be guided by Indigenous leadership and Indigenous perspectives and Indigenous views on what should be done with respect to the locations, the sites, the information, and how we proceed together on the path forward. On that note, I will end there and turn it over to my colleague, the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada, Minister Patty Hajdu, to my right.
Well, thank you very much for an opportunity to say hello, bonjour, tanzi, kwe kwe this morning. I want to acknowledge the elders and the leaders and the youth in this room, so many of whom I've had a chance to meet with and work with over the last number of years. And I want to thank the leaders in particular for the challenging jobs that you do every single day for your communities. You're charting courses with all kinds of needs for your communities, but you're also answering the phone at 3 in the morning when community members are in crisis. And I want to acknowledge all of the work that you do every day on behalf of your members. Yeah, let's give everyone a I think that does deserve a round of applause. So I believe that as an elected leader with the federal government, one of the most important priorities, and I think really driven by the vision of the Prime Minister, is to work on ways that we reduce the colonialism that deeply impacts your everyday lives. And so it's been my honor to work on things that also include, recognition in official government documents like the Budget of Canada that the Indigenous priorities are just as important as every other Canadian priority. And that's why last year it was so exciting for me to see that Indigenous priorities received 25% of the new spend in the Budget of Canada. That means more schools, more water, more infrastructure, better education, and all of the things that you have all been fighting for many of you, your entire careers. I'm also excited to comment a little bit about the work that we've been doing on water. And you know the Prime Minister made a very ambitious commitment to lift all of the long-term drinking water advisories across this country. When we were elected, there were 145 in place. We've managed to prevent and lift almost all of those long-term drinking water advisories. We have 31 left, over 29 communities, with a plan in place for all of those to be lifted as well. But I have to say, all of this heavy lifting is not just the Government of Canada and the investments of the Government of Canada. It's your communities driving the infrastructure, the training, the recruitment of water operators, and you need a good partner. And Canada has stepped up to be a good partner in this work. The Prime Minister mentioned Bill C-61. This is, to me, one of the exciting pieces of work we've done together over the last years, and it hasn't been easy. This bill, as you know, was co-drafted with the input of many different partners, and I do want to thank the AFN, National Chief, of course, the First Nations Advisory Council on Water, and Treaty 6, 7, and 8, who have significantly impacted how that water legislation looks now. And for the very first time in the history of this country, water will be declared a human right for First Nations people, and that is because of you and your fight and your determination. Now, I know that you're having a very vivid conversation about what to do next on child welfare, but I have to say, while you're doing that, we haven't stopped in ensuring your communities have the tools that you need to take back control of children and families services and to be able to keep kids closer to home. And so, as of this fall, we've signed 11 coordination agreements with communities across the country, which will significantly reduce the number of kids in care and ensure that kids grow up in community, surrounded by the love, the culture, and the language that they so richly deserve. And that is, again, the work of communities. The government is there to enable, to partner, to support financially, but it's your laws, it's your work that has been able to realize those commitments, and we know that there will be more in the future. And I have to say that on top of that, we've been really excited about the investments in schools and the efforts of communities to improve, renovate, or build schools. That's why about 255 communities have received funding supporting around 38,000 students with either renovated or new facilities. In some cases, bringing education from kindergarten to grade 12 home. For the very first time, children can stay at home for the entire of their high school education, and that is important because you know that graduation rates go up when kids are at home. You know, and I'm from Thunder Bay, Ontario, I know exactly how hard it is for families to send their kids away for education and for kids to be able to complete that education. This is a path we have to stay on as a country. We have to continue to make sure that regional education agreements are signed, that schools are built, and that kids stay at home and get the education they deserve. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I want to end just on housing, and I want to tell you, no matter where I go, I hear about the growth of your communities, the challenge you're having on housing, and we are investing. Since 2015, we've increased targeted investments in housing by over 1,300%. That's $2.43 billion of the $4.1 billion committed, and there's more to do. I want you to know that I see you. 15 people in a house is not conducive to learning, to growing, to being able to sleep, to be able to study, to be able to work. And so we have to keep pushing to make sure that all of the departments of Canada, and I'm really pleased to see infrastructure and CMHC and so many other departments step up to this task, that we close that gap for once and for all. So thank you so much for all of the learning that you've given me over the last 3 years. It's a distinct honor to work with you. Thank you. Garrett. And now to my colleague, Gary Anandasangaree.
Thank you, Kwe, bonjour, Eileen, and hello. I am so excited to be here this morning, and I want to thank you for the warm welcome, and let me acknowledge that we're gathered here on the Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. And I also want to acknowledge the National Chief, as well as the many chiefs and leaders that are here, along with elders, for this very important gathering. And I want to give a very special shout out to the youth that are here, many of whom I had the privilege of meeting yesterday, and I look forward to the great conversations that we will continue to have. Given that time is very limited, I'm going to just talk about a couple of major things that we're working on. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge all those who are working in the front lines, especially with unmarked graves, as well as missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit individuals. As I travel the country and as I meet many people who are working frontline, I just want to express both how inspiring it is, but also how difficult the work that you undertake. And I just want to assure you that as a government, we will continue to walk with you on this path. It's a very difficult path, and I know those of you who put your lives on the line each and every day to support each other, to support communities, to uplift your nations, are truly the warriors that are seeking both safety, security, but also answers for the losses that your communities have endured over many generations. So I want to just acknowledge you and the work that you do. This year, we've had a number of significant progress in our path to self-determination, and I just want to highlight a couple of very important things. First is the recognition of the Haida Nation as the government of the Haida Nation. And I don't know if anybody's here from Haida, but I just want to say congratulations. This is a very important role that you have played in the leadership of making sure that your nation is self-determining. At the same time, we have initialed 3 modern treaties in British Columbia through the BC treaty process, and that include Comox, Kitsillas, and Kitsim-Kalem, and we were able to initial those treaties earlier this summer, and they're well on the way towards consultation and eventually signing. I also want to acknowledge the work both in Nova Scotia as well as Ontario with the Mi'kmaq and Anishinaabe education sectoral self-government agreements, which will transform, and in the case of Ontario, transform education and outcomes for First Nations people in Northern Ontario. So I just want to acknowledge the work that everybody has done to get us to this point. As we speak, the Parliament will be considering C-77. This is the Commissioner of Modern Treaty Implementation, and it is something that many modern treaty holders have been working on for many years. This will add to the work of Minister Virani in passing Bill S-13 on the non-derogation clause. I want to thank everyone who has walked on this path to get us here. But today I want to highlight one major reform that we want to announce, and that is with respect to additions to reserve. And this is something that both AFN and many of you have been working on for many, many years. And the frustration that exists within communities on the speed and the time it takes for us to approve the ATRs, we've heard you. And we've heard the feedback, and based on that, in addition to the 2 major changes that we announced earlier this year, we want to advise that there are 7 additional changes that we are introducing today, and I'll just highlight a few of them. First, it'll be making environmental site assessment requirements more flexible, streamlining the application process, refining the dispute resolution provisions, dropping restrictions on improvements to proposed reserve lands, clarifying the 3-month waiting period for comments on proposals, and address the requirement of municipal service agreements to be in place prior to the ATR, which will significantly reduce requirements for joint reserves. So these are very important changes that we're proposing today, and I look forward to the questions and comments from all of you here. Thank you, Miigwech, and really good to see everyone.
Tansi Boshu, it's great to be here. Collaboration, partnership, and co-development are principles of the work that we all do, but something that I've brought forward. Partnership and collaboration in northern Manitoba is exemplified through the Arctic Gateway Group. Arctic Gateway own and operate the Port of Churchill, Canada's only northern seaport that's connected to a rail line, and it's on Hudson's Bay. The Arctic Gateway Group is a partnership of 41 First Nations and Bayline communities, all from northern Manitoba. They own and operate Hudson's Bay and the port, which is the only affordable year-round, all-weather transportation. The rail line is absolutely essential for supply chains. It's essential for local food security and regional connectivity. If the rail line goes down, people do not eat. So we have formed a strategic partnership with First Nations in northern Manitoba to make sure that that rail line is sustainable. It's through partnerships like this, we believe, that Canada wants. It will First Nation ownership, which is incredibly important in the north. In downtown Winnipeg, in the urban area, we've created another strategic collaboration with Southern Chiefs organization. We're supporting Southern Chiefs in its quest to transform the iconic Hudson's Bay building in downtown Winnipeg, 700,000 square feet. It's been empty for 15 years, probably more. It's going to be transformed into 350 affordable housing units, a health and healing center, future governance house for Southern Chiefs. It's the sort of model that we can use throughout Canada. There's lots of work to do, but we've already accomplished a lot through collaboration, through partnership, and to co-development. And I want to end by giving you an example of how we try to be more responsive to your issues. When we were all elected in 2015, the work of the Minister of Indigenous Services, Patty Hajdu, of Crown Indigenous Relations, Gary Anandasangaree, and myself, Northern Affairs, was all done by one minister. Now just imagine what a difficult job that minister had to respond to all of your important issues throughout a vast country of Canada. One of the initiatives our government moved on was to separate those tasks, the workload, into 3 ministries, and I believe we've been more effective in addressing your issues, and that's something that's significant that not a lot of people know at this point. But I think it's worth noting in a forum like this. Miigwech.
Thank you. We now have a question period. We have about 20 minutes for the question period. What we'll do is we'll start with microphone number 1, then microphone number 2, and if there's questions on the Zoom, we'll take the question on the Zoom, and we'll go back after to the microphones. And we'll take 3 questions at a time, and then the ministers and the Prime Minister will answer. I do remind you that we have about 20 minutes for this question period. I see a lot of you chiefs are in line to ask questions. So you do have the right for your 4 minutes each. If you don't need all of those 4 minutes, what we'll do is you can stop your question and we will go to the other microphone. So we'll start with microphone number 1.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. Chief Cold Lake First Nation, Kelsey Jacko, and I wish you can have more time than 20 minutes because we have numerous speakers at the mic, but let's start. Mr. Prime Minister, when you were first elected, you made the statement that no relationship is more important than the ones with First Nations, yet your government has done everything to undermine our treaties, including co-development legislation that impact our inherent and treaty rights without rights holders at the table. I will start with Bill C-61 because water is life and your government is legislating it. We have never given up our jurisdiction and we must protect our waters. Your legislation won't do that. Bill C-61 constrains our rights and limits our jurisdiction. We hope that our treaty bilateral table is not a publicity stunt and marks instead authentic recognition of the true spirit and intent of the sacred covenant, the treaties. Our treaty implementation, we are rights holders, and you cannot determine our treaties, as your government did not enter treaties with us. However, you do have the legal duty to uphold the honor of the Crown. You cannot delegate your legal duty to consult to the AFN, manipulating our consent. You must meet with the rights holders of this land, which includes all First Nations directly. Considering treaty, we want to let you know we will be seeking some redress on the issue of Canada having delegated our resources to the provinces by the way of the NRTA through the UNDA Action Plan. An OSA declaration, you should recognize it. You recognize the NRTA is not your doing and welcome collaboration, pushing back and cooperative provinces. Also consider in treaty First Nations should not be in the Migration Act. We are not immigrants. We are the first people of this land. We should be exempt, utilize and recognize the J Treaty border crossing. If your government decides to fix this, the treaty organization should be your co-designer. No offense to the AFN, but those who are rights holders should not take over this work on the border crossing group. We have an organization, Treaty 1 to 11. Please recognize it. Much of your legislation impacting treaty rights uses a term Indigenous. Please use First Nations. In these situations, the Métis and Innu are our brothers, but those words have different meanings when you're talking about our treaty rights. Now I know as chief, my constituents always give me shit, so I'm done giving you shit. I called you out a bit last assembly, but it's out of frustration. But I meant the invitation. Come to our territories, meet our people, learn their stories. I will welcome you. And I do have letters for you and your staff. Please accept them. Masi Cho, and I'll just leave it at that since there's numerous speakers at the mic.
Thank you, Chief. We will now go to microphone number 2.
Good morning. I'm no stranger to you. As you know, our treaties are very important to us. And our treaties are with the Imperial Crown, not with Canada. Canada is given the responsibility to fulfill those promises of the Crown to our peoples. And as you know, when we entered into treaty, Canada assumed title to our territories and our resources, which is not true. You have yet to prove to us how you attained that title. When we meet with your ministers, they come, we talk to them, and they're off. They might hear our words, but they don't listen, because nothing has changed. We, as people, know that Canada, in utilizing the Indian Act and other means like the 60 Scoop, try to get rid of our people so you can legitimize your title to your assumed title to our territories. And you say you want reconciliation. Well, let's deal with the truth. You want true reconciliation, you come and talk to the rights holders, as Chief Jacko said. We are the ones who are party to our international treaties that have a say, not Canada and not the AFN. We are the ones that can establish a good working relationship with you, and I mean a good government-to-government relationship. If you look at the genocidal tactics that you used all these years, our peoples have suffered because of that. I don't have to repeat what Canada did to us. Our people are sovereign, they're living in poverty on this great land that the Creator gave us. Our people should be prospering from this, not the immigrants. the Canadians. We should be. Today, and I can assure you, our peoples are not immigrants. The rest are. We agreed to share our territories for settlement purposes only, and that has to be respected. And you talk about reconciliation. Well, you're still using your legislations to assimilate us, and that's to get rid of us, to take away our right of self-determination. You look at the Crown promised that there will always be Indians and lands reserved for Indians. Your Land Management Act is taking that away. Your Tax Commission is taking that away. Your Financial Management Act is taking that away. Your C-92 is taking that away, trying to disperse our peoples into the dominant society, which is going to kill our identity. You have taken our languages away. Now we're regaining and learning our own languages again. Our right of self-determination has been totally damaged by the Canadian government, and not just you, all those other governments that were in place. You all have the same agenda, and that's to legalize your assumed title to our territories, which we have never consented to giving up. I spoke my language to the ministers, to you ministers. They didn't understand what I was saying. How do you think our people felt at treaty making? They couldn't understand, so our understanding is different from the Canadian. So we need to sit down today. And Mr. Prime Minister, you, I don't know, since you got in, we have invited you to come to our nations for Treaties 1 to 11 to sit down and clarify our relationship with you. And we have a right to government. Last time I raised it...
Thank you, Proxy. Can you summarize
You started
rapidly?
talking about... Can you not take my time? You started talking about your self-government policy, which undermines our right to government. So we invite you to come again to Treaties 1 to 11, August 22nd, 2025. We have already invited the Governor General, who's supposed to be a representative of the Crown, and we'd like to know what her role is and how she's going to help to bring forth the promises of the Crown to us. So we hope, I hope someday the Canadian government will wake up and truly respect our rights as Indigenous peoples, the non-immigrants to this country, to our land of bountiful, and our people don't suffer anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Proxy Crowdchild. We will now take a question on the Zoom. Chief Lee Spannen.
Councillor, Election 1-1 in Jawa and Squash Lee Spannen, Evan Seletko in the Cup Nation, Interior British Columbia. I'd like to thank the host nations for allowing the important work to happen in their territory. I'm talking to you from the unceded territory of the Nlaka'pin and the Silt people. I have questions for Prime Minister and Minister Hajdu and Minister Anandasangaree. First, Prime Minister, you talked about 2015 showing up and working nation to nation. And you talked about sovereignty, Bill C-61, UNDRIP, and policing. And so did Minister Hajdu on reducing colonialism, recognizing Indigenous priorities, lifting the drinking water advisories, Bill C-61. What I didn't hear was children and families. I have two questions. The first one was asked on numerous occasions without responses or definition. What is the funding provided to BC Ministry of Child and Family Development by Indigenous Services Canada for Child and Family Services? Second question, how will Canada act with urgency upon the discriminatory practice of off-reserve funding? In the past, Coldwater Indian Band has had unresolved concerns and issues with the Government of Canada. We have invited the Prime Minister numerous of times to Coldwater and to the Nicola Valley to meet with the Nicola 5 chiefs. It took 6 months before one of his ministers actually responded to that invitation. Knowing that PM will not come to our territories to speak with our leadership, we again invite the PM and Minister Hajdu and Minister Anandasangaree to the Nicola Valley to meet with our leadership, as well as to meet with the Coldwater Indian Band Chief and Council on our unresolved concerns and issues that we have. Knowing that there's an upcoming federal election and that you're here talking about a platform when you talked about past issues with First Nations across Canada, how much of those actions are going to actually happen from your party? So again, the invitation going out to you, Mr. Prime Minister, and your ministers that are in attendance with you today to come and talk with our leaderships of the Nicola 5 chiefs, as well as the Coldwater Indian Band Chief and Council. So hopefully I get some answers today on the questions from you and your ministers. Dr. Jam, thank you for giving me the time to ask my questions.
Thank you, Chief. I will now let Prime Minister Justin Trudeau answer the questions.
Yeah, I'll briefly start and then pass it over to the ministers. First of all, there's a really, really important reflection that everyone in this room has to have about how Indigenous peoples, how First Nations specifically in this case, want to organize themselves. It is not for the Government of Canada to say who should speak for whom. And that is something that we have been there as a partner in resourcing and investing in helping reflect on how you choose to govern yourselves and organize yourselves. The AFN exists as a body that has gathered you here in Ottawa. If you want to look at something other than the AFM as a way of organizing yourselves, we will be there to work with whatever you decide is right for you. The time when people in Ottawa, however well-meaning, can decide how you must go about organizing yourselves is long past, and that's a good thing. That's why there are many nations across this country who have stepped out from under the AFN, stepped out from under the Indian Act, and are choosing to sign self-governing treaties with us. And our goal as a country is to end the Indian Act, to see it finished, to see every First Nations community, every First Nations nation, every Indigenous community and nation determine what kind of relationship you want with the federal government and with Canada. So I know over the past number of years, the fact that after decades of federal governments not showing up, after decades of federal governments not putting money on the table, not in any substantial way like we have over the past 9 years. The imperative was very much on just being seen. But now you are working on, as you need to, figuring out what the path forward is for the next generations of engagement with the federal government. And we are here as a government to work with you on that. And it's not easy because, quite frankly, for generations, nobody has given you the space, nobody has granted you the legitimate and even recognized your legitimate rights to determine your own future. We are here to say, we're working with you, we want to know, and it won't be easy and it won't be quick, because these are things that will impact deeply on your communities, not just now, but for generations, as you well know. But we will continue to show up on that, and I appreciate both the invitations and the engagement. I travel across the country all the time and meet with many different First Nations, Métis, Inuit groups, and sign agreements and move forward. But a lot of those things are, the first steps are working with ministers to define and find ways to move forward quickly. Because if I'm showing up and we end up not moving appreciably forward, that increases frustration on your sides, and your people say, okay, the Prime Minister's coming, this is wonderful, we can solve this now, and we sit down and we start negotiations that may take months. There's something that misses on that. But I am glad to come to celebrations, I'm glad to sit down and work with you, and I will continue to. I'll turn briefly over to Minister Hajdu, I think, for some of the responses on this as well.
Well, I think, Prime Minister, you've done a really good job in describing how the journey on water evolved from largely led by AFN to including the voices of so many different First Nations partners, independent First Nations, Treaty 6, 7, and 8, who were very vocal at the beginning of the journey that AFN could not speak for them, did not speak for them, and furthermore, they felt completely disrespected by Canada. And this week, we signed Treaty 6, 7, and 8, a treaty on a table on water and related water infrastructure, so those conversations are formalized and ongoing. I know there's a lot of questions about Bill C-61, but just as a very high level, it actually increases the control that First Nations people have over setting rules and regulations to protect water, increases capacity of First Nations to have the ability to monitor and protect source waters that feed their systems, and increases your voice in a co-developed way to determine how much funding you should receive. This is a first in Canada, by the way. You know how the Government of Canada determines usually for you how much you're going to receive in funding for water. No more. This bill says that the Government of Canada actually can't do that, that we have to work with First Nations on a nation-to-nation basis to make sure that the formula to protect and provide water actually is sufficient. So I'm excited about this work. Does it mean the bill is perfect? I don't think any bill is perfect. I think there's always room for increased conversation, but it is light years better than what was there before. And it is due to the work and the warriors that have fought so hard for this. On child welfare, I know that you are having a very vigorous conversation about the vote and the lack of the consensus and the failure of the vote on the $47.8 billion final agreement. I have been disappointed. To be clear with you, obviously this was what we felt was a very good step forward. It actually exceeded the requests of the CHRT. We haven't waited, by the way, for the conclusion of that agreement to make significant investments in children's success, including, for example, supporting post-majority care and a number of other spaces that you know and you've been calling for a long time. But I will just say this. We share a common objective, and the common objective is that your children succeed. Canada needs every single person to reach their full potential if we're going to meet the challenges ahead. So we'll continue to have these conversations together.
So I just want to let you know that we've already used our 20 minutes, so we'll do only one more round of questions. We're already prolonging the question period. I'm sorry, Chief Bonspiel, I see your disappointment. But we'll do a round, so you will have the right to have your question. We will start on microphone number 1.
That's it. The time is gotten, Justin Trudeau. Nanaskaman bait up me agotans. Bentotoyak. Ichigawan and Mutamak. Dinimina Agocha get the magistic. Otavici act. The Gipit Namanoma. Get a Tuscanaga, Hegagavici, Guauk. I get Pisquagua Cape. At Taganasimon. Good afternoon, good morning, Prime Minister. My name is David Monias. I'm Chief of the Nation of Pimichikamak, a sovereign nation. I want to remind you that we were sovereign before we were treaty. But we invited you to come sit with us many times, and somehow it never got to you. So I'm here, standing here before you. I'm going to be asking for my counselor to hand you a document, if you don't mind, without the police getting in the way. And I spoke to you by phone before, and we were talking about our sovereign rights, talking about our treaty rights, that they need to be implemented. They need to be respected and honored, not just in words of promises, but in terms of action, because we do want action from you guys to make sure you recognize our sovereignty, to make sure you recognize the treaties. It was just a relationship document. You, when I spoke to you last time, you said Ottawa, Canada cannot do it for us, that we have to do it for ourselves, but you would support us and you would help us and so forth. When that was on rapid housing. I'm still waiting for my houses that you said that I would have. Today we submitted a document for a school, a new school, where about 400 of our children are not going to school because we refuse to send them out to the urban centers. We don't want the day schools, we don't want residential school settings anymore. We need funding, but it's beyond the funding capacity of Manitoba region. Those people are not helping us like you said they would. We want you to live up to your part of the agreement that in the treaties, education treaty, our people need to make sure they're educated. I'm hoping that I'm going to be meeting with your representatives this afternoon, and I'm hoping that they'll be finding solutions for us to make sure we move forward. So with that, I'm going to ask one of my councillors for the remaining of my time to speak to you about healthcare, and her name's Councillor Brenda Frog.
Good morning. I'm honored to be in your presence. I've been a nurse for over 20 years in our northern communities. You need to do a complete review on the healthcare delivery to our First Nations communities. You have a high turnover rate on your Indigenous Service Canada nurses. They need better support. You need to review the nursing agency healthcare delivery model. You're spending billions on nursing agencies to come to our community. The care is inconsistent and fragmented. You need to do better to support your frontline workers. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now...
Thank you. Prime Minister, and just one last comment. I'm going to read out what I wrote here. Canada must not practice denialism or diminish the realities of what occurred in residential schools, day schools, 60 schools. Denying or minimizing these atrocities is a direct insult to survivors, families, and communities who continue to live with intergenerational trauma caused by these institutions. Denialism has no place in Canada's journey on reconciliation. To move forward, Canada must confront its past honestly, without excuses, have measures. The unmarked graves are not just historical remnants, they are crime scenes, and they are a testament to the lives of stolen lives, cultural genocide to steal our land, and also speaks to the resilience of the Indigenous people. That's why we're still here. Truth and justice are non-negotiable. We will accept nothing less. Land back. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Can we open microphone number 2, please?
Second, Prime Minister and Ministers. Agueron de Yujats. My name is Grand Chief Victor Agueron de Bonspiel from Gunnersadaga and Mohawk Territory. My questions are, when I was elected in 2021 as the Grand Chief of my community, I ran on a platform of transparency and accountability and inclusion for my community. And I began an investigation of fraud into the pandemic spending of my community's council back then. It's been 4 years now that investigation has been going on, and it's with the Sûreté du Québec who's leading the investigation. And the federal government has yet to be involved in that investigation. It's coming to a close now. It's had 3 extensions, and I have yet to hear from the federal government on what they think about their money being spent. Almost $6 million was sent to my community, and $3.5 million that went into salaries. One person was earning up to $27,000 every 2 weeks on her salary as a vice chief in my community. And I have nothing to hear from anybody on your side, Mr. Prime Minister. I would like this investigation to come to a close and that there be retribution for my community, that these people be prosecuted and not swept under the rug. I want that done for my community. Also, and this fraud investigation, for your information, was put up to embezzlement now. It's been upgraded, not by myself, but by the investigators. So I really hope that there's retribution for my community. Secondly, political interference by your ministers into my communities and Mohawk Council's ongoings and our toxic environment. Your minister, Ms. Hajdu, had sent a letter to my council recognizing their quorum over me, the elected spokesperson and Grand Chief of my community, and giving them that recognition of government authority over my community. My community is a custom band. We're not Indian Act. We don't follow that. We follow custom. So I follow custom and I run under my people's authority. And I'm asking through my community that you ask and tell your minister to revoke that letter, recognizing my authority and spokesperson for my community. I'm demanding that. Secondly, I'm looking here that my Iroquois caucus community would like to have you come to our next meeting, which we're having in next month, January, from the 15th to the 17th in Akwesasne, Mohawk Territory. So we'll have an open invitation to you, Mr. Minister. We'd also like to demand a public apology for you putting your army against our communities of the Mohawk nations during the Oka crisis. We would like an open apology and written apology that you sent your army to attack our nation. Thank you. I'm going to split my time with these lovely ladies here. Down, go on.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mike. My name is Martha Martin. I've been waiting for this moment for 4.5 years. I am the mother of Chantal Moore and Mike Martin. I have been across this country and I've met with many mothers who are losing their children to your policing. It has taken 4.5 years to come and just to have 2 minutes. We're here to talk, how do you say everything in 2 minutes? I've lost 2 of my children. My daughter was shot and killed by your policing. My son died in police custody 5 months after. And I'm still 4 years later waiting to hear from a coroner for a case that's open. Mothers are tired of burying their children. So many of us mothers have come together. We've tried to reach out through media to meet with you so you could come and hear our stories. This is like 2 of us who are a small percentage. We did a press release yesterday. And you know what? There was another shooting by the time we were done that press release in Vancouver. How many more of our people have to die at the hands of your police? We've come to say it's enough. Like, what are you going to do about it? It's time to sit down with us, and it's time to start making those changes.
Hi, my name is Claudette, and I'm the mother of Regis Kochenski-Paquette, who was thrown off the building at 100 High Park in Toronto 2 days after George Floyd passed away. When George Floyd passed away, you took a knee for him. What have you did for any of us Canadians when our children passed away? So why I'm here today, we want police reform. We do not want the police out there shooting our children. We want you to sit down with us and have a meeting with the families. We're grieving here, and we are getting no justice. Every single day, one of our children are being killed by the police. Another thing, we do not want police investigating police. That is so stupid, okay? Because before you became a police officer, you were a civilian, okay? So why don't we hire civilians to investigate police officers, have them trained properly. We cannot take this anymore. The killing needs to stop. We were in Ottawa a couple of times, right at Parliament. You never once, ever came out. We voted for you. We are the Canadians here. Americans do not vote for you. So take care of this country, please.
The mother of John Wells. On September 17, 2024, my son wasn't even written the rights. And his last words were, "I don't want to die. I don't want to die. They killed my boy. They murdered my son." And today, I have to live with that. For the rest of my life, I am shattered. I am broken. When is this ever going to stop? My son didn't deserve that. He was only 42 years old. He was only 42 when they killed him. That was racism, what they did to him. That is not okay. That's not okay. My son is gone. I have to live with that. I have to, every day I wake up, knowing that I'm never, ever going to see my son or talk to him. That is so devastating to get a call from the tactic team in Calgary telling me my son is never going to come home to me. I'm never going to see him again. He had a lot of goals. He had a lot of dreams to accomplish. But the policing shortened his life, and that's not okay. That's not okay. I have to live with the broken heart, the shattered of my soul. Every morning I wake up and I ask, help me to get through this day. So that policing needs to be done. Something needs to be done. They're targeting all the Native people throughout Canada, and that's not fair. And I'm speaking for all the mothers that cannot be here to speak. And for them mourning their kids, getting a call. That is devastating, so devastating.
Shame on Canada! Shame on Canada!
I have one more thing. As you can imagine, being a parent, what do you think this little girl who's got no more mother, she is terrified of your police, terrified. She sees the guy, all she sees, you know what, is a gun. She is terrified of your policemen. What are you going to do to rectify this and to make this right? Come and sit with our families. We invite you to come and sit with us. Hear our stories. Hear about who they were as people, what goals they had, what struggles in life they had. They were human beings too. They were not just people who were disposable because your policemen think they're not of value. Please, we're asking you to come and sit and meet with us, talk with us, hear our stories.
Please have your police officers retrained because they're not doing a good job.
Thank you. Thank you for your sharings. I will now let Prime Minister Trudeau answer.
First of all, I want to thank the mothers who came forward and who have been sharing their grief, their loss not just with us here, but for many, many months and in some cases years. No mother should ever have to bury her child, let alone 2 children, let alone more. So many communities have been affected by tragedies that need to stop. I agree. I have heard stories across the country, and I will continue to engage and listen to people as they share their stories, but I will also committed to doing everything in my power as a government to try and fix this, to try and change and address the systemic discrimination, the built-in colonialism, the racism that continues to exist within our systems. These are things that should not be. We're in a world where good people need to continue to step up, as you are, and demand better. And people who are in positions of leadership and authority need to work every single day to do better and to be better. We're in a very, very imperfect world and are reminded of it regularly. There is deep injustice in the world, and the choices that all of us have to make, and all of you in this room as leaders, like all of us and everyone in any position of community leadership, political leadership, or anything, needs to reflect on how we move forward, how we address these things. These are the conversations that we're having, nation to nation, community to community, conversations in which our ministers are deeply, deeply engaged to try and counter the injustices and tragedy in the world. And all we can do now is pledge that we will be there. We will work with you. We will hear your pain. We will support the path forward that you see to make sure we create a world in which no mother has to grieve her child. That's my pledge to you. That's part of why I stand here today. That's why I continue to believe in this country and its future, and know that everyone needs to be part of shaping that future. All of you. Your role here today, but your role back in your communities as leaders remains essential. And we will continue to be here with you. That's the pledge I have, and that's what we will continue to do. Merci. Merci, Joe. Cooks Jim.
Thank you. National Chief has gifts for the Prime Minister and the ministers. I'm sorry, the Prime Minister really has to leave. I'm very sorry about that.
Do you hear that, Can we open microphone number 2, please?
Hello, my name is Natalie Starlight Fraser, and I am a youth on proxy for Skoluk First Nation. I want to thank Chief Chapman for having me here. I am a youth that grew up in care, and I just want to speak on some matters. First Nation children in care in Canada has a higher representation than those that were in residential school. Alongside the high representation is an increasing number of deaths of our children dying while in care. A gap that I observe is regional child and family programs not respecting Bill C-92 and minimum family standards set out by the Canadian government. Regions see these standards as an option, and our families continue to be harmed in the child welfare system, as no one is holding regions, provinces accountable to these acts that you are supposed to protect them. I ask that you ensure that the next final settlement agreement does not discriminate against off-reserve kids in care, as regional child and family service programs are getting away with the mistreatment of our children and families, resulting in death. What is going to be done to hold regions accountable to Bill C-92, minimum family standards, and other provisions that were set out by Canada to protect our families from the child welfare system? And my question for you, Trudeau, what would your message be to First Nation children and youth currently experiencing the child welfare system? And I would like to proceed the rest of my time to Mary.
Thank you. Definitely needed to hear the youth.
I'd like to answer that youth first, and then maybe we can take your question. The pattern of child and family services across the country, provincial child and family services primarily, taking kids out of their communities, kids at risk, out of their communities, out of their languages, out of their identity, and putting them with non-Indigenous families was a modern iteration of residential schools, taking kids from their families, their communities. That's why we pledged to work with First Nations on C-92 to put an end to the removal of kids at risk from their communities. And this is something that we believe in deeply, something we co-developed with you, something that we are funding in places across the country where the systems are built up. There remains a huge challenge in working with the provincial child and family services agencies, some of which are coming on as partners of making sure that we are protecting kids who are vulnerable while at the same time allowing them to grow in their language, their culture, their communities. But there is much more to do. We reached a final settlement agreement that has been rejected by the AFN. We continue to be here with a lot of money on the table to work with you to move forward, to make sure that kids right now have opportunities to get better care, because we can't talk about the future unless we're taking care of kids in the present. So I thank you for your words, I thank you for your leadership, and we will continue to put children first in everything that we do. That's what we are here for.
Take the next. I'm Chief Proxy for Silaco. I just wanted a few things, and really I commend our young person here for her courageousness. I'm kind of a little bit of surprise that you were disappointed that the draft final settlement agreement didn't pass, because it was a great agreement for Canada, was not for our children today and those not yet born. That's why Canada was disappointed. I'm seriously, in this era of jurisdiction, and I don't know how that was okay that the BC and other provinces would cede their decision-making to another entity and to another province when it came to governance within the final settlement agreement. In BC, we guard our right to the free, prior, and informed consent. We guard our authority to speak. On November 21st, the CHRT tribunal letter decision was ordered Canada to uphold Jordan's principle. The tribunal also ordered Canada to mediate and consult with all parties, noting that BC could only participate if all the parties agreed. Yesterday, we found out that Canada opposes the First Nations leadership Council participation in this process. We ask that you publicly retract the opposition and let our BC voices be heard, because our children deserve that. I also want to talk about that same matter, that you also publicly commit that you're not going to be seeking a judicial review on the November 21st tribunal letter decision on Canada's non-compliance on Jordan's Principle. We're asking Canada also for a renewed negotiations mandate and to negotiate in a fair, just and transparent manner to end discrimination now, but also in the future and for those not yet born. We don't want those same mistakes repeated in the flawed final settlement agreement. We want to make sure that you do better. You've said you're going to do better. Well, let's get the best minds that you have, the best negotiators of Canada. I don't want to be sitting with the B or the C team. We need to have people like Mark Miller, perhaps even yourself, to sit there, because this is historical, making the historical event that's happening. I look forward, we all look forward to making this world a better place for our children. We are willing to make history together. We are willing to ensure that the final settlement agreement is good not only for our children now, but is the best that we can do for those not yet born, and we commit to working with you. Masai.
I'm going to turn to Minister Hajdu to speak.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for the question on Jordan's Principle. And look, the reality is that, we are the government that stepped up to honor the CHRT's requirement to fulfill Jordan's Principle. And over the last number of years, $8.1 billion worth of products and services have been spent to support First Nations children to have everything that they need to thrive and to close those gaps that have existed for First Nations children for far too long. The program has grown at rates that I don't think any one of us could have expected. And in fact, what we have committed to doing is working with all parties to determine what is exactly a priority. Many of you have talked to me about the backlog of cases and the backlog of approvals, for example. And if everything is a priority, of course, it's hard to determine then what comes first. And so we've had a challenge with the intake process, with determining what really is the most urgent. And we can't do that alone as Canada, and we know that. And so we're going to continue to work with our partners on a path forward to make sure that kids still get the care that they need, but that we do it in an organized way so that really urgent requests are not buried under a mountain of other requests that may not be as urgent. This is work we all have to do, by the way, because this program, as you know, even though it's ordered by the CHRT, really needs to be run well so that Canada is proud of it, so that you're all proud of it. So it's something that doesn't end up in the crosshairs of the opposition parties who will be looking for ways to undermine Jordan's Principle, to undermine the support that this Liberal government has made for First Nations kids across the country. So I'm counting on doing that work with all of you. These are difficult conversations, to be sure, but I think that we've had tremendous success under Jordan's Principle, making sure kids get what they need.
Thank you. Can we open microphone number 1, please?
Bonjour, thank you. My name is Chief Chris Monias from the Skandaga First Nation. My community members are here, plus I got a couple of my councils here to support what I'm saying. In 2018, you stood here promising us that we're going to get clean drinking water. It's already 2024. We're on 10,900 days. That's 29 years, 10 months, and 4 days of our boil water advisory. The longest in Canada. We're the poster boys and people of long-term drinking water. We don't see an end in sight. Although we were trying to upgrade our water plant, it hasn't been working at all. It's been a total failure. We've been under a state of emergency for suicide crisis, mental health and addictions, boil water advisories, so many and so on, things that affect our quality of life. I didn't want to come here yelling, but when you walked away there, I wanted to have a good dialogue. I hate yelling. But unfortunately, sometimes you have to do that, but to be heard. Anyway, we've been, we need to improve our quality of life for our people. We need to, every year, I'm almost bringing children home in coffins because we don't have high schools in the community. Almost every month, I'm bringing elders home because we don't have care facilities in our community. Every last January 2, I took my best friend home because he couldn't do home dialysis and he got lonely and passed away. I took him home from Thunder Bay Hospital in a coffin because he couldn't do home dialysis because of the boil water advisory, which he was approved to do. We can't keep on living like this. You can't keep on extracting our resources and expect us to live in poverty. You can't make decisions without us. The land, the water in our area, the children, is our jurisdiction. Nobody, I mean nobody, will make that decisions on our behalf. It's all Niskandaga. We assert our jurisdiction.
And we agree. We agree. And that's why we passed UNDRIP legislation. That's why we work with you and why we are charting a path forward. And yes, there is a lot of work to do. We recognize that. On boil water advisories, when we came into office, there were 109 boil water advisories, in long-term boil water advisories across the country. We lifted 140 or so. We have stopped lots of short-term advisories from becoming long-term advisories, and on the 30 or so left, there is a plan and funding for all of them. And I'll turn to Minister Hajdu specifically on your. I'll turn to Minister Hajdu specifically on your case because I know she's been following up directly with you on that. Patty.
Well, thanks, Chief Muniz, and it was great to see you a few days ago. And as you know, we've been meeting every few months to make sure that Niskandaga stays in the centre of the work that we're doing on water. You were one of the litigants in the class action lawsuit that we settled for over $8 billion. And thank you for your leadership in fighting for clean water, not just for Niskandaga, but for the whole country. In fact, that was one of my first jobs, as you know, is being on camera with you, talking about the harms that you talked about to your community, because as many non-First Nations people don't know, lack of access to water has profound and lasting impacts, and you've shared your own personal story with me many times. It's super disappointing to me that the plant that was installed not even a decade ago doesn't deliver clean water. And you know we have an engineering firm working with your community. You are directing that work, but they've identified deficiencies. We've committed to ensuring all of those deficiencies are rectified. And I wrote you a letter, as you know, to commit to the design of a new plant. And I understand that testing is underway right now. Furthermore, we'll be there for Niskandaga. I have committed to you that we'll keep meeting for as long as it takes to get the long-term boil water advisory lifted. And that is my word, and I have lived up to my word ever since we've known each other. So we'll continue to do this work, but I will say I am also, and this is a warning shot to all contractors out there, I'm watching, and I am appalled at the way that First Nations communities are ripped off when millions of dollars are invested to build plants that don't deliver the water that they have committed to deliver to you. And I have, as you know, with you, talked about the many different ways that we might address that. But to all contractors, many who lobby me every single day, we're watching. Because it's unacceptable that Niskandaga got ripped off, and we will continue to make sure that that does not happen ever again.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Trudeau, Minister Hajdu, Minister Anandasangaree, Minister Virani, and Minister Vandal for staying longer. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your time. You had used your time. I'm very sorry. We do have very important resolutions for our children to discuss.
I am a youth, and I
Prime Minister, come to this
We do have very important resolutions for our children.
Talk about moving forward on the child welfare.
So what?